Welcome to Make More Marbles. My name is Brad Hart, and we're here to interview the game changers, the future makers, the co-collaborators and creators who are here to collaborate with one another towards a better future for all of us. Enjoy the show. We've got a great guest coming up for you right now. What's happening? My name is Brad Hart. I am joined today by the lovely Marianne Twitty and Ameer Rosic from BlockGeeks. .com. It's the premier site on the internet of all things related to blockchain and cryptocurrency. And I run a site called Make More Marbles. And one of our many fascinations is finance and therefore cryptocurrency. I've been dabbling in space since 2009. And Marianne, thank you so much for having me. Alex, thank you so much for having me at Startup Week Chattanooga. Ameer, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Quick little bio myself, a serial entrepreneur. I've been in the online space for the last 7 years, from e-commerce to digital products to membership websites to SaaS. Got the crypto bug about 2-3 years ago. Good friend of mine, his son created Ethereum, and then we decided to go into business, which is BlockGeeks, and here we are.
Marianne, we'll get this unmute thing down, I promise.
Okay, so my first question for you would probably be, just start from the beginning. How many people are familiar with blockchain? Assuming you got a start. Let me see where we're at. Okay, what? You know what a blockchain is? The blockchain is. Okay, let's start with that. Or your screen sharing, there we are. Let's start with that. Tell me what a blockchain is, what the blockchain is.
So the blockchain is essentially a public ledger system. And back in the day when I wanted to write a check, let's say, there were 4 ledgers in that transaction. There was my ledger, which is my checkbook. There's my bank's ledger. There's your bank's ledger, Marianne. Let's say I'm writing you a check in this scenario. And then there's your bank's ledger. All of those ledgers need to be reviewed and agree with each other in order for that transaction to go forward and the money to take place, to change hands. They call it clearing a check. Now, picture now that everybody has a copy of a public ledger, which is called the blockchain, of every single transaction that's ever happened since the beginning of time. Now, instead of having to verify with a third party, we have what's called distributed trust across the network. So now 50 million computers around the world or more can verify a transaction in real time and then put it into the blockchain, which essentially becomes a transactional record since the dawn of time of every transaction that's ever taken place. Ameer, do you have anything to add to that?
No, you're doing a good job. Keep on going.
Thanks. So the first questions that people come up with are like, okay, how is this secure? Well, since you're going to ask me about Alan Turing anyway, I guess I'll preempt that just a little bit. And Alan Turing had an intractable problem, right? Alan Turing was the brilliant cryptographer in World War II Britain who said, okay, we have this Enigma machine. Every day, the Germans are using this to encode messages to each other and send those messages, and there's 150 million different combinations for this machine. So even if we have the machine, we have to know what combination they're using. So even with 24 hours in a day and the smartest minds working on this, Alan Turing quickly realized that they would never solve the problem just by hacking it, right? Just by going after it with brute force. So what they decided to do instead, or Alan decided to do instead, was go into a room and build a machine that could calculate the possibilities very quickly. And he ended up inventing the first computer. And it would take about 20 minutes to crack the code. And then they had the entire day before they changed the codes again to decode and transcribe German messages. Now, let's relate this to the blockchain now. We have 50 million computers verifying within a 10-minute window, and the keys change every 10 minutes. And a new block or hash function is added to the blockchain. And that makes the problem of hacking and security much more difficult to break. I would say it's virtually impossible, not that it's never going to be possible. I'm sure there's many people in various places, and Ameer will get more into this, that would love to hack the blockchain because that essentially would allow them to take the money that's in it, right, or represented by it, including cryptocurrency. But the possibility is actually relatively remote of that happening, and every day that passes where it isn't hacked speaks to its ability to protect itself. And then as we go into the future, many blockchains will be used as various different platforms for a new technology and a new way to do things with distributed trust, with ease of use, with no one third party that controls it or has power over it to influence it in any way that isn't the best and highest good of the collective, if you will. So it's a really interesting system, and a lot of people are really excited about it for many different reasons. So that's kind of where we're at today and where we see the blockchain going and changing various industries along the way.
Is this where I segue into a question about the blockchain being full and other woes?
Ameer, I think you'd be better equipped to handle that one.
So what was the main question? Issues with scaling the actual tech?
More the scaling. Let's answer that one first.
Yeah, it's a good question. First, we have to identify what we're speaking about. For example, Bitcoin and Ethereum, those are two different blockchains. They work completely differently, and Ethereum will be completely different within the next 6 months. Then you have something like Zcash, then you have something like Monero, you have some blockchains in China like Neo. So when we're speaking about a blockchain, we can't really describe every single one with a broad stroke. Each single one is different, has different application, has different consensus models, has different security models. But the most popular one, Bitcoin, for the longest time, it's had scalability issues. And just recently, I think it was in August, they did a scaling upgrade on the network finally, which was called SegWit, which they kind of switched around the consensus protocol to make the headers in the block more variable and to create more space for transactions. So right now, Bitcoin still has a scaling issue, even though it has SegWit, and they want to activate Lightning Network, which should happen within a year-ish or so. But once again, you have to ask yourself, for example, in Bitcoin's case, some people view it as a currency, other people view it as a store of value, such as digital gold. So if we view it as digital gold, for example, we don't use gold on a day-to-day basis as legal tender. I don't go buy coffee with gold. I don't pay my rent with gold. So the people that view Bitcoin as digital gold, you don't really need scaling solutions. You really don't need to worry about high transaction fees. What you need to worry about is to have the longest, most immutable ledger, and it's really difficult to change. That's the most important thing if you're viewing it in that specific paradigm as digital gold. But then we can switch over to Ethereum, for example. Ethereum is switching over to something called proof of stake. So Brad mentioned it briefly with computers. Computers kind of doing brute force guesswork to figure out a block. That's the Bitcoin protocol. So you have something in each block in the blockchain called a nonce. It's a random number. And all these big miners around the world with ASIC cards, these specific cards for mining Bitcoin, they need to do guesswork. And they just randomly keep on figuring out this mathematical equation until they get it, and then they solve the block. For Ethereum, that's changing very soon for a new protocol called Casper, which is called proof of stake. So imagine you don't need any more graphic cards or any specific cards. In fact, all you need to do is virtual mining, where instead of us using electricity, AC, graphics card, etc., we actually stake currency. In this case, you stake Ethereum on the blockchain and you become a virtual miner. So I think we are in the precipice of the evolution of the scalability in the next 2-3 years. So we'll see maybe in 2-3 years, transaction speeds of north of 10,000 per second.
And that's one of the many different problems with a blockchain-based cryptocurrency is just you can't beat Visa, right? Visa can process millions of transactions per second, and the blockchain just wasn't designed to handle that, but it's becoming more and more relevant as people begin to adopt it more and more. And therefore, there are many more types of coins and changes to the blockchain that are happening as a result.
Yeah, and also it's a little bit different though when it comes with Visa. Like for Visa, the biggest thing Visa is it's a fraud business. It's not a money business. That's a major thing that they do. For example, in the blockchain, there is no fraud. If I'm moving money, I have the money. And if you're receiving money, it's your address. There's no me saying I pretend to have money. It's either you have currency or you don't have currency vis-a-vis a public blockchain. And I think where we are going with I would say with the developers focusing on the blockchain, I think we might actually see Visa levels within 4 or 5 years that are scalable, but not just scalable from a technological aspect, but scalable from a security aspect. It's one thing to have technology that scales to this. The second question is, can it actually handle the security requirements to handle the network of that size?
Absolutely, and that's a great point. I mean, as we introduce this into more facets of different industries, how can we keep the security high, but the usability also high. And the function of value in any system is how, you know, usable it is, how much it helps the people do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
So Marianne, I'm going to put it back to you. What would be the most and best highest use of having, what would be the next best question to answer, I guess?
Well, can we address really quickly with the scale context in mind? Do you see the currencies that are available now, the different coins that are available now? Do you see that as ever being a currency more than an investment?
You want me to take it?
Yes, please.
Well, first we have to identify a couple of things. A, what is a currency? And B, what is investment? And C, the use caseage of a currency. So there's two things happening in the space right now. You have open source decentralized cryptocurrencies, such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, Zcash, Monero, Bitcoin, Litecoin, etc. Then you have these tokens, which are built on top of Ethereum using coding ERC20, which are more or less centralized tokens. They're not decentralized cryptocurrencies. They're controlled by a startup or a DApp, decentralized application built on top of Ethereum. And they have a CEO, they have a CTO, they have a COO, etc. And they control the supply and demand for the most part of these, let's say, tokens. Specifically, some call it utility tokens, some call them token applications, etc. So that's a big difference. First is understanding there is a difference between a token and a decentralized currency. You can't compare a Bitcoin and a Monero to a token such as token ABC that just did an ICO yesterday. Those are two different things. So if you're talking about investments and you're talking about let's say risk tolerance, and you're talking about basic supply and demand, you're talking about use caseage, I would definitely see a decentralized open source blockchains that have cryptocurrency as a much more investment vehicle as opposed to a token. Because the whole purpose of a token is a use case token. It's not an investment. You need this API token to actually use a platform. Without this token, the platform falls apart. For example, even Ethereum, like if Ether did not exist, you cannot have the transactions, you cannot have the security model, you cannot have the consensus model. And there's a bunch of tokens, for example, Filecoin that wants to hash and encrypt all files on the internet. Without the actual token, that whole system falls apart. So it's very imperative for us to figure out distinctions and difference between cryptos, open source, private, on-chain, off-chain. And once these definitions have been identified, then you can determine what type of investment portfolio you want to create, how risk averse are you, what is your security protocols for actually keeping your tokens and cryptos, whether that's online, offline, etc.
That's a really great point. And I think that kind of segues nicely into my next point is, well, why is this important? Obviously everybody's talking about it, but let's kind of give a little bit of grounding from the last financial collapse. So the last financial collapse was predicated on the notion that we couldn't service our debts and we could continue to print money regardless of what the actual value of the money was. And the thing that you need to understand about cryptocurrencies in general is that they are finite. And it's hard-coded into the system that there will never be more Bitcoin, there will never be more Ethereum. Once they issue a token, there's only a certain amount. And therefore, as a function of speculative demand, the prices will rise, right, in that system. If the pressure to increase the price increases, then the price will increase as well. So it's not unlikely that you could see a very expensive Bitcoin. It's not unlikely that you could see a very expensive Ethereum. And these are not forward-looking statements saying that you should invest in any of these things. I'm just saying that there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins. That's it, right? So it's just really fascinating to think what the world could look like in a world of deflationary, decentralized currency versus the current world where we can print US dollars or euros, billions of dollars a day are printed currently and have been since 2008. In fact, just the US Fed working with the US Treasury printed over $90 billion a day in the years following, $90 billion a month in the years following the financial crisis to provide liquidity and to stem the tide of a falling market. How I got involved with this was actually kind of an accident. In 2008, I was making applications for the iPhone, which was a brand new business then. And one of the kids that, was coding these apps for me back in the day, you could just write an essay basically and put it on the app store and it would sell for $1 or $2 and just, sell all over the world. I said, one of them got bought and I went to him and I said, hey, what would it take to, to build your dream app, like, what would that be? He said, well, I build a Bitcoin trading app. And this is 2009. So I'm like, what the heck is Bitcoin? So I kind of fell into the space backwards. And he went on to try to create like Coinbase basically was the app that he wanted to build. And he obviously wasn't set up for the task. And he failed. But had I just taken that money, put it into Bitcoins, it was $5,000 at the time. At 5 cents, I would have had 100,000 Bitcoins worth somewhere around $600 million today, not including the Bitcoin Cash and whatever other forks and kind of hashes code. So just understanding like massive wealth is being created in the space, and it's still relatively small. I just want to share one slide just to give you guys a kind of an investment overview. And again, not a forward-looking statement, not a recommendation whatsoever, but this is what it is, right? So here's the top 10 cryptocurrencies. I'm just going to share my screen as they were yesterday. Can everybody see this? So just nod if you can. So these are the top 10 cryptocurrencies. You got, Bitcoin, Ether, all the way down to Neo and IOTA, and their relative market caps. Now, $93 billion might seem like a lot of money, but in reality, it's actually a very small percentage. If you take all these cryptocurrencies and add them up, the actual amount compared to the relative amount of currency in circulation, which the best guess puts it somewhere around $85 trillion, is a drop in a veritable ocean. So you're talking about $150 billion roughly, compared to all M1, 2, 3, and 4 being somewhere around 85 trillion. It's a very, very small amount. We're talking an entire market cap of crypto that is about a quarter to a fifth the size of Apple, which is one company on one stock exchange in one country. So the amount of cryptocurrency that exists now and its relative value compared to what it could be if it became a more widely used store of value and utility aside, like, could be very, very shocking in the future to see what it could be. If it became 1%, it still has quite a bit of upside from here. So it's just an interesting thing to look at. And I wanted to give you guys kind of a more basic primer as well. So I've also made like a little cheat sheet for when I do panels like this, and that can be grabbed here in case you want to learn more. And it's got a few documentaries that are really great, and it's got a link to Ameer's site, which is BlockGeeks. And he does some of the best guides on the internet. They've received, millions and millions of visitors to the site. It's some of the best content I've found. So if you really want to just get into it and understand it from a technological perspective, I recommend downloading this. It's a free little kind of cheat sheet. It has all the links to all the things you're going to need to know just to get educated about the space, because we're still very early in early adopter mode. And it's a really exciting time to be, helping to create the future. And part of the future is not only understanding what the tools are, but using those tools to create better systems to serve more people. And if we want to create a better world, that's really where it's going to come from, right? There's an old Winston Churchill saying that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. Well, the same could be said for capitalism and a bunch of other systems that we take for granted are the best that ever existed, and they are, but what's coming next and how do we create that? It's a really exciting time because we really get to look at the world in a whole new way, taking power from the institutions that may or may not have been the best thing at the time that could have existed, and now what can exist as a result. So living in a world of possibility. And, I just want to speak to one more thing, and I'll hand the panel back over, is that you got to understand this entire space could go up in flames in 50 different ways overnight with zero recourse. There's no way you're ever going to get your money or your money back. So if you do decide to do anything in the space, just do it with the caveat that there are a lot of ways it could go wrong, and there would be no way to get it back. It is not FDIC insured, for example. Like, there's no type of governing body that allows to do that. It's basically the wild, wild west of new tech. So with that caveat in mind, only look at it and invest amounts of money that make sense that you could lose all of and be perfectly happy with as just taking a flyer on something. And that's been my strategy, and it's worked out quite well. So that's all I wanted to say about that. And thank you.
Ameer, did you want to add anything to that before I ask my next question?
No, that was good.
Okay. You described this world that's possible. Could you describe a few things that you're excited about and what that looks like? Either one of you?
From a technological perspective, or are we just talking about blockchain or in general?
What you're excited about seeing if it happens. Like, if it doesn't go down in flames, what are you excited about seeing?
Self-sovereignty, giving back the power to people. I don't like labels, but the closest thing I view myself as a libertarian. So giving power back to the people to make choices that they want to choose, invest in what they invest, keep the money that they worked hard for, create more tribal villages. You know, that's one thing missing in human society today. People think that technology is connecting us more. Yes, it's connecting us on a technological aspect in a 2D fashion, but on a peer-to-peer emotional aspect, on an empathy aspect, on a tribal knowing each other, on a deep, deep relationship aspect, it's not there. You know, for God's sakes, I live in a big condo. I don't know my neighbors. I don't know anybody. I don't know their names. I don't know nothing about them. It can be a most beautiful human being living beside me or the worst human being living beside me. So what I'd like to see in the future is with this technology coupled with AI and other forms of technology is we can create more, let's say, village-like cities where it's peer-to-peer communication. Because at the end of the day, what is money? It's a form of communication. That's all it is. So if I want to freely communicate with whoever I want, how I want, when I want, so nobody can impose their views and their power on me. For example, certain taxes that we pay, it's imposed by a gun. If I don't pay it, a sheriff will come to my house with a gun to my head and tell me I need to go to jail if I don't pay taxes. Right? So I like to live in a future where we don't take things by violence from other human beings, where everything's voluntarily, where I volunteer to do things that I want to do. So my hope with this tech and other technologies with food and farming, etc., is to create more of a new technological peer-to-peer, reverting back to how tribalism used to be. Well, I don't want to say tribalism, but more like human connection.
I think that's a great point, Ameer, and I just want to add to that. I think that a lot of the problems in the world, and I speak about this quite often, come from the perception of scarcity when it's not in fact real. And scarcity is real sometimes, right? Sometimes there's just not enough to go around. That's a fact. But when you zoom out more and more and more, and you got to understand humans are by nature evolutionarily programmed to think linearly and locally. They don't see the global exponential world that's being created and the capacity to create more that's being expanded all the time geometrically. What you start to see is that our ability to provide for more people at a high level in a sustainable way, and I'm not talking mansions and private jets for everybody, but food, energy, water, shelter. We already have the ability to provide for most people on this planet if we just got past the idea that there's not enough to go around. It's a silly idea. It's not a true idea. And the science is making it more and more possible every day. So now if we have the ability, don't we also have the responsibility to create better systems that serve more people? And I think that goes and dovetails nicely into what Ameer is saying. Is like, how do we create a better human experience for everybody that is also scalable and sustainable?
Can you tell me what, given it doesn't go down in flames, can you tell me what obstacles you foresee being available to maneuver around in order to achieve what you both have just described, aside from the mental space of the scarcity mindset?
Well, truthfully, I think that is the biggest hurdle. Technology itself never solves anything. For example, Tesla, the electric car, the first electric car was created in 1897. I repeat that, 1897, the first electric car was created. So technology is innate. It's a non-moving object. Human beings have to adopt it, use it, and actually create a myth around it. If you read the book Homo Sapien by Yuval Noah Harari, the number one tool, I would say, or technology that human beings ever invented was mythology, communication, storytelling. That's how we evolved as a Homo sapien creature. So my thing is, we need to figure out, and right back to what Brad said, we really do need to figure out how to eliminate this scarcity mindset in human beings. At the end of the day, if you look at jealousy, greed, and all these so-called sins, it's programmed into us because back in the day, for example, we went long periods without food. For example, if we look at tribalism back in the day with Dunbar's number, 150 people in our tribe, that's supposedly the maximum amount of people that you can actually create a bond with. That created in-groups and out-groups. In-groups saves human beings. For example, you versus I, that you over there creates an in with us. We're group A, that's group B. Group A sticks together and looks out for group A, doesn't look out for group B. That served the purpose back in the day. Scarcity mindset served the purpose for survival back in the day. But right now, as Brad said, for example, food. People think we don't have enough food. That's the biggest myth possible. We have so much food in the world. The problem is logistics, and the problem is spreading out that food for the globe. We have so much of everything, so much of water, so much of food, so much of shelter, but the distribution of those commodities is very small. That's the issue. So we need to distribute it among everybody. So I think we do need to figure out ways from from the ground up, and maybe starting from kids. I'm a firm believer in live by example, right? That's how human beings learn. We have something called mirror neurons. That's how babies learn. Babies see their parents doing things, they like to copy them, right? So how, I'm a firm believer in, can we figure out to create societies or small villages or something like that, that people can mirror, other people can see by example. Oh wow, those guys did it over there. How can we do the same thing?
And I'll just add to that. We had a little discussion beforehand where I said a common saying, right? Talk nerdy to me. And you're like, I just said that yesterday. That's a perfect example of the world we're creating through the internet. You saw a meme. I saw a meme. We both laughed at it. And then we both used it in our lexicon going forward. I don't live where you live. I don't know who you know. We only met last week. And all of a sudden we have a common shared language. And that's only speeding up as the world gets smaller and smaller through technology. I have a supercomputer that exists in my pocket that didn't exist 10 years ago that I just emailed Ray Dalio, the famous investor, on this morning. How did I get Ray's email? Don't worry about it. But the point is that you can get to anybody nowadays, and that creates a smaller world in which everybody can contribute, everybody can participate, everybody can grow at the level at which they feel comfortable. So I don't think it's a ability issue. I think it's a belief issue, right? So with the blockchain, let's just kind of run down the numbers. I mean, what if fraud went away? All the time, energy, attention, and money, our resources are being spent, 500 billion a year just in money, not to mention all the buildings full of people that just try to fix the fraud problem. What if there was a time machine like on your Mac that could roll back to where there wasn't fraud, or it couldn't exist in the first place? You free up all that time, energy, attention that you spend on protecting yourself to now create, right? We think of money as a discrete unit, or there's some story around it, but it's really just one form of energy. It's multiplication and it's leverage, right? And what our really true human value is the ability to take our time and using energy and attention to create something that is more valuable than it would have been if it was just squandered on whatever it was squandered on. We have a short amount of time to live. Why not spend more of that time in creation mode and making more, and not just grabbing for what's already there, which serves nobody except ourselves. And even that's spotty. That kind of could go either way. The only thing I found to be true in my short time on this earth is that the more you give, the more you get. And that's built into our DNA. It's the law of reciprocity. You can ask Bob Cialdini about that. And in this new world where we can create these systems that serve more people, we can create this blockchain-enabled society that changes real estate and changes identity and changes healthcare records and changes any number of different things. Well, what does that world look like? Where you're not afraid anymore just to be a human being. Where there's no one entity that could control or hack or persuade or dissuade or enforce their will, because they're not in control of it. I'm in control of it. You're in control of it. Ameer's in control of it. The miners in China are in control of it. We all have a piece of this thing. We all get to create and say what it's going to be. It's a pretty exciting time.
So in my understanding, in my short time on this earth, or long time, whatever perspective you have on it, I'm curious because one of the things that I've seen is the eradication of a belief of isolation, or eradication of isolation even. So one of the benefits of the social media and the widespread access to each other that I've seen is exactly that, being able to reach out and being able to connect, even if it's not real life, it's moving past that idea of isolation. Now, with that being said, do you have any insight on what the next stage of that evolution will be? If isolation was the first one, or eradicating isolation was the first one, what would you say is the second one?
Well, with the blockchain, the major thing is going to be controlling your own identity and your data. The amount of, you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The amount of money social media platforms, and at the end of the day, people view Facebook as evil. Listen, Facebook doesn't hold a gun to your head, or Google doesn't hold a gun to your head, be like, hey, you have to use us. You're voluntarily using their platform. You can easily not use their platform. So they are a private company. So whenever people like get on these companies, I'm like, listen, they're private. They can do whatever they want. It's not a communist country. They're not a They're not a company open to the public. It's a private company that does private things. But at the end of the day, they still profit off our data. And there's a lot of situations, for example, with Equifax, for God's sakes, it just got hacked twice, not once, but twice. And all your private data gets leaked out with your SIN numbers, social security number, which people use for fraud, and they duplicate your identity and they sell your identity, globally speaking. So at least with the blockchain, what will happen, and there's people working on this like Civic, like Uport, there are there's companies working on this where you control your data that's hashed. For example, let's say Brad has his hash data and he's using certain social media platforms. He can have now the ability to decide what he would like to sell to companies, as opposed to the other way around, where the companies just take his metadata, or they take his likes, his interests, his habits, etc. Brad has everything controlled, and there can be almost like a marketplace, like, hey, these companies are looking for X data, and Brad's like, okay, I'll sell you this information of mine, but only this information for this rate that I want to sell it at. So in the future, what's going to be really important for us is people need to take ownership and responsibility for their own data. And it's funny when people complain about data, I'm like, do you ever take ownership of it? Do you ever ask yourself, why are you using Facebook? Do you ever ask yourself, why do you open all these cookies on Google? Do you ever ask yourself why you're using open Wi-Fi in coffee shops? Like, people think things are supposed to be just done for them. If you really care about your data, take responsibility and onus for your data. So that's where we see, like, blockchain will help, control your own data. It's going to help for communication. It's going to help for sovereign nations. It's going to help for me doing proper commerce with anybody I want to do. Like, for example, right now, if I want to send Brad some money, I have to go through different systems such as PayPal and Stripe, and I don't hate them. That's a business. They did amazing things back in the day, but as like any business, they go out of business. I don't see any horse and carriages anymore on the road. They're out of business. Same thing, Western Union, they're going to go out of business. That's a $500 billion business right there as remittances. People sending money from, like, North America all across the world, like Philippines, Jamaica, Indonesia, and China, etc. And certain companies take a ridiculous fee for sending money around the world. And these companies are called rent-seeking companies. The only way that they make money is they're the middlemen. They do nothing but literally take a piece of the pie for just being there. Now imagine where I can control my own data. I can be anonymous if I want. I can choose not to be anonymous. It's up to me if I want to tell everybody, hey, this is who I am. And I can send Brad maybe $10,000 in Monero or Zcash, and it costs me literally pennies on the dollar to send it to him. And the great thing about it is he gets it within a minute. That's where we're going. We're going through, we're evolving to a society of free speech communication, because everything we do is communication. I give you money, that's communication. I speak to you, that's communication. I send you an email, that's communication. I sell you a good, that's communication. I vote for something, that's communication. So we're moving to times where we can freely communicate peer-to-peer as a human civilization.
And I think it also, just from a practical perspective, I mean, think about what cryptocurrency allows you to do. You have security features, and we all recommend that you keep your keys offline and that nobody has access to those keys, because if you lose your keys, you lose your coins. But I can literally memorize 24 words and walk across a border with $1 billion in my brain, and nobody would be any the wiser.
Yep.
That's the world of the future. So think about that as a sovereign individual who wants, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If that's important to you, if you strive to those values, then this is the type of stuff you should be looking at.
Well, look what's happening in Venezuela. Like, everyone's using crypto now. Venezuela has burnt down. The socialist system there has collapsed. People are literally going to zoos to find food because there is no food. The inflation here, what was it? $1 Venezuelan dollar is worth 1 Satoshi right now. 1 Satoshi is something like less than a penny. Like $1 in Venezuela is worth less than a penny right now in the currency market. And this is where cryptocurrency is helping people. People are sending money from all around the world, digitally speaking, and people are receiving money, such as Bitcoin, within 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or whatever forms of crypto, whether that's Zcash, Monero, Litecoin. And people in Venezuela are using this to survive. So there's a perfect case study example of people actually using it in real time to survive a government regime that's oppressing them.
I could ask you questions all day long. We have about 15 minutes left. Do y'all have a lot of questions that, yes? So you want me to take the last 15 minutes and let y'all ask questions now?
Perfect. Let's do it. Q&A style. Thank you, guys.
Okay, here we go.
That should be great to be free from fraud. And I'm a reformed banker wondering how cryptocurrency makes sure that bad actors and the illicit funders are prohibited from the party. How are we keeping the bad money out of the system?
Can you hear that?
So if you could just restate the question, please.
If I could restate the question.
Yes.
She says she's a recovering banker, and she's curious to hear your thoughts on how you keep the bad money out. Is that okay?
So I think what we're referring to is like the Silk Road stuff and Dread Pirate Roberts and drug transactions online.
Her facial expression is saying yes. You are.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. So let me just speak to that. I mean, since the beginning of money, there's always been instruments that are untraceable, like cash, or very difficult to trace. And, you know, blockchain isn't really anonymous in the sense that, yes, there's a public key and a private key, and only if you have the private key and say, hey, it's my coin, I'm going to get it. But the law enforcement officials also like to refer to the blockchain as what they call prosecution futures, that someday they'll be able to pin that transaction to you. And it's in the fly is in the amber, and from the beginning of time, it will always be there. So it is possible that one day you could get pinned with a felonious action or a criminal act, or buying or selling drugs, or whatever it is in your particular municipality that they would like you not to do. So you do need to be aware of that. Also, I believe that human beings are going to find a way to get their needs met, whatever those needs are, and they're going to use cash or any other instrument to pay for that. So I don't think that blockchain or cryptocurrency particularly, that doesn't seem like a problem specific to that. I think that's just another thing that it could be used for. Just like it could be used to feed people and to, help people out, like in Venezuela was a great example, or transact with lower fees or more transparency. I think that you can use a hammer to build a house. I think you can use a hammer to cave somebody's skull in. It doesn't make the hammer bad or wrong. It's just the choice of the people. So to answer your question, I think, there's ways to keep bad actors out of the system, maybe, but I don't know that that's really the point. I think the point is that people will use whatever tool at their disposal to do whatever it is they're going to do in the first place. And this will only add the layer of verification, distributed trust, veracity, and utility within the network that will allow it to happen more instantaneously and anonymously on the internet, provided that they use that public and private key hash system that the blockchain is known for. Does that help? Or did I not quite hit it?
You hit the nail on the coffin.
To start with.
You hit the nail on the coffin right there. Like, at the end of the day, why do we define these people as bad actors? There's no different. I truly believe all drugs should be legalized, controlled, and taxed like no other drugs, no different than pharmaceutical drugs. The whole jail system, the whole policing system is based on getting more people inside. So we shouldn't be punishing people for consuming drugs or selling drugs. That is asinine. That is crazy. As Brad said, as soon as you make something illegal, and we can look at North America when prohibition was illegal, everybody's still drinking. Anytime, and this goes back to psychology of human beings, anytime you tell any human being that you can't do this, mark my words, he'll do it. It's simple as that. So we need to destroy big business, which is arresting people. We need to destroy big business, which is putting people behind bars, which private prisons make $400 a day off of inmates. So I'm a firm believer in the future, legalize everything, get better quality so people don't overdose on it, take taxation off of that, and people can use crypto for whatever they want.
And put all that money that she spent fighting the drug war into treatment programs, which are actually proven to be way more effective.
100%.
In Portugal, and heroin is a great example of that, and you can look into that if you like. I don't do drugs personally. I don't believe in doing that, but that's not my value set. And I don't also agree with my ability to legislate somebody else's experience of life, provided that it's not harming anybody else.
So in the instance of human trafficking, would you have similar views of legalizing that and then prosecuting the perpetuators or the customers rather than?
I think I've already answered the question with, I don't believe, in harming somebody else in order to have my needs met.
Because that's harming somebody directly.
Right. That's an entirely different conversation. If I take a drug and I don't drive or operate heavy machinery, I sit in my room and look at the walls, it's not the same thing as trafficking a human and selling them into slavery. That's just apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it still sounds like it's pretty porous. It's just a porous system.
It sounds like a porous system, she says.
A porous system?
A porous? Like
Porous.
holes.
Oh, like not, yeah, doesn't hold water. Okay. Well, Ameer, you could speak to the high end all day. I could speak to kind of the stories around it all day and the mythology around it. But I think at the end of the day, it's too soon to really tell whether it's a better system or not, although it's getting a lot of interest by really smart people. I mean, you have people like Jamie Dimon jumping on and saying, oh, don't buy Bitcoin. I'll fire you if you buy Bitcoin. And then JP Morgan goes buys a ridiculous amount of Bitcoin. I mean, there's very, very smart people who are out there getting very interested in this technology. And I think it's safe to say that it's a bet that big institutions are willing to make on the future, or they're just too afraid not to be a part of it to ignore it completely. So I think it's worth having a conversation about it. And I think reasonable discourse is perfectly acceptable, and constructive criticism makes everybody better.
Let me put it this way.
I don't want to invite throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Sorry.
Cryptocurrency is going nowhere. China will have a legalized cryptocurrency. They will replace renminbi within 3 years. Estonia is looking at that. Barbados is looking at this. Hong Kong is looking at this. Japan just announced this. Actually, cryptocurrency is a perfect form of money for government, because if it's a private ledger, they can track everyone's usage of it and can take a flat tax from everybody. About 40% of people globally don't actually pay the proper taxes. So that's a lot of revenue loss, even though I'm in a different philosophical mindset for that. But when it comes to cryptocurrency as a utility for governments, 100%, mark my words, governments will be using it as legal tender, and there won't be any cash in society.
There we go.
So many non-social questions about
Okay, non-social question.
Well, I'll start with the most pressing one. Over 1,000 cryptocurrencies out there. What's the criteria? How do you go about evaluating what is a viable cryptocurrency, or which ones are worth using as investments? Even though I don't work with you, how do you evaluate?
With over, did you hear that, or repeat it again? You did hear it?
Please restate it.
Repeating it, there are over 1,000 different ones. So how do you go about evaluating which ones to pay attention to?
This is a simple question. First off, like what I said at the beginning, is there's a big difference between an open source decentralized crypto and a token. Those are really, really different. Second of all, it's no different than investing in any, if you're familiar with angel investing, what do you look for? You look for the team first, you look for the problem that they're solving, and you look for the timing of the market. A lot of times what you see with the ICO today, they're complete pump and dump schemes. I won't name names. I know a lot of whales in the industry, a lot of crypto funds I know, that they will get discounts on ICOs, they'll arbitrage it by 200-300%, and they'll cash out. But ICOs make things a little bit more complicated, and we're evolving. In the future, you'll see crypto equity ICOs with dividends, so you won't just be investing in anything. For the most part, people don't get this. When you invest in an ICO, you invest in nothing, literally. You don't get shares, you don't get equity, you don't get dividends, you don't get royalty rights, you get vaporware for the most part. And most of these ICOs are a joke, complete joke, rubbish. Maybe about 4 or 5 I've seen this year that actually have a solid team first, like really good human beings, and a problem that actually makes sense, and the timing of it makes sense, and the technology is legit, and they have the proper human capital for this. Another big issue in the space, maybe globally speaking, there's about 500 legitimate full stack blockchain developers that really, really know this technology, and a select few people that know crypto economics. So the actual human capital to successfully undertake this is limited. They're busy building Bitcoin. They're busy building Ethereum. They're busy building these massive enterprise systems online. They're not building small startups. So when it comes to evaluation, it's no different than any evaluation. How risk tolerant are you? Are you investing in a human being? Are you investing in the technology? So look at these checklists. And for the most part, I stand by the golden rule. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true, and you're probably the schmuck at the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, I think from an investment standpoint, you got to understand utility and demand, which I think market cap is a great fundamental, just, hey, what is it in relation to other things, right? Why is Bitcoin the most popular one? Is it because of utility? I don't think so. I think there's much better utility cryptocurrencies, but it's also in the highest demand. So as a speculator, you can make money on demand and supply, right? And the functions of markets. But as far as utility goes, there are certainly better solutions than Bitcoin. Just to use an example.
Go ahead.
So what are some of the ways that this can blow up?
What are some of the ways that this can go down in flames?
This is a great question. Oh, so many ways. Well, if somebody were to hack the blockchain, that would mean that the trust would be gone. And therefore the value of anything riding on that blockchain would be gone as well. And now I want to just make a clarification point, because a lot of people have heard like Mt. Gox, for example, which was an early exchange that got hacked. That is not the blockchain getting hacked. That is an exchange and a store where these people had been storing their coins getting hacked, and then their keys were stolen, and therefore their crypto is gone. When your keys are gone, your private keys, it's as if somebody else has your money and they can spend it however they wish. They can stand up and say, hey, I'm taking this money, and nobody can say the wiser, and it's in the blockchain and it's over. So you got to think of it as, you can't go backwards. Like, you can't go back and change the past of what's happened in the blockchain, but going forward, understanding that you need to protect yourself and your keys is really important. So from an individual standpoint, that's one of the ways it can go up in flames. People have lost millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. I've lost Bitcoin. That is, pretty expensive lessons along the way just from not securing it properly. So that's from an individual standpoint. From a global standpoint, any hack that was to occur, or any place where the trust was broken down, would, I think, undermine the very, so if you look at a dollar bill, I have a $5 bill here. It says, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, right? That is why we say this is valuable, is because the government backs it up. And it's not tied to gold or anything else. It's just paper. But the government says, hey, you got our full faith and credit that we're going to protect and defend this piece of paper being worth $5 of our dollars, right? And blockchain is not that. But when you understand what it actually is, and you understand that, there are so many actors around the world using it and contributing to the security of it, based on cryptography and sound principles of security that are way more advanced than, I'm even qualified to speak to, which is why I have Ameer here, that it's pretty dang secure. And the fact that it continues to persist.
Bitcoin's the most secure network on the planet.
Yes.
More secure than any other government network. It's getting hacked every single day. The closest threat you have is probably quantum computers, though. Then we got bigger problems to worry about, because they'll break every cryptography encryption in the world, including everything that DARPA does and Russia does. But there's also solutions for that. People have worked on the elliptical curve signature for Bitcoin. Quantum proof blockchains already exist. So there's plans both for Ethereum and Bitcoin to implement once quantum computers do arise. So people have been thinking about this already. Other ways issues can happen is, for example, let's say the top exchanges in the world where all liquidity flows, governments can easily go to these individuals because they are private corporations, like, hey, you guys shut down. So the technology itself won't be, let's say, quote unquote hacked, but the actual liquidity supply, so supply and demand changes right away. So basically people get scared, and what's going to happen, everything liquefies, the price drops, right? But then again, people start buying afterwards once they figure out other ways to have liquidity. Decentralized exchanges are coming here. Within 2-3 years, you're going to have peer-to-peer, open source, decentralized exchanges, not controlled by anybody. That won't be a centralized exchange. That's like in Delaware or in Hong Kong, where you have to do a wire transfer. So there's human elements over here. Then you have security, like individual security. Like, let's say Coinbase, which holds millions and millions of dollars every day. Let's say they become the next Mt. Gox, which, hey, probability speaking, could be a possibility. Let's say they get hacked, the faith in that exchange loses, and people start dumping money. But from a purely hackable point of view, it's another thing to talk about. Also, you can't also describe everything as the same. Bitcoin is very different than Ethereum. Ethereum is very different than Monero. Monero is very different than Litecoin. Litecoin is very different than, say, Zcash, etc. And all these like Bitcoin Cash. IOTA, which is not even a blockchain, that's Tangle technology. So all of these are different and have their own, let's say, strengths and weaknesses. So, each case you have to look at as an individual case, as opposed to brushing everything as a blockchain and everything's the same.
That's a great distinction, Ameer. Thank you. I'm learning more all the time, little bits and bots, and it's changing so rapidly that it's very difficult to keep up with everything.
I can't even keep up every day. It's too much.
Yeah. And you got to understand, there's the smartest people in the world are working on this right now. And also the smartest people in the world are trying to hack this right now. And the fact that they're not succeeding is a good sign.
A startup raising value with crypto?
Meaning like investment dollars, essentially, or investment coins? Okay, yeah. So you're essentially talking about the ICO structure, the initial coin offerings, which a lot of people think, that actually brings up another great risk is regulatory risk. You know, the SEC and various agencies around the world really want to regulate this, and they're still kind of at odds on how to do that. They've regulated as a security already, which is just a blanket statement saying, hey, we're just going to treat this like a stock or any other investment. But also, as things go forward, there will be. I'm sorry, I lost train of thought on the original question. It was the
startup raising capital value.
So through ICOs, there's obviously going to be regulatory issues, but it's a very functional system right now. We have people raising tens of millions of dollars in mere minutes on the blockchain, and it's happening so quickly and from so many places all over the world. There's no accredited versus non-accredited. There's no barriers to entry, which is like the same thing that we had in the 30s and the 20s, which is why the stock market blew up. Right? Because you had uninformed, uneducated people who were farmers that had no business investing in the markets, throwing all their life savings into the markets because it was going up and up and up. So you have a similar kind of frothiness, but on a digital global scale now. And I think similarly, we'll need to have kind of a reaping of all the BS and pump and dump scams and the regulatory laws that come out to kind of call that as well. So yes, it's a very effective way to raise money. You could go and put out a piece of vaporware, like Ameer said, and raise a bunch of money based on that, or a white paper. People write white papers and they go and raise tons of money, and it's nonsense. It's entirely, there's no fundamental reason why you should be giving these people your money. And I would say unequivocally 99% of crypto ICOs are probably scams at some level. And the problem is that the people who are creating them think that they're doing the right thing. They're not bad actors necessarily. They just don't know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
They can't create the thing that they think they can create.
It's also greed, right? Human beings are very greedy. A couple of questions I asked for these ICOs, like why do you even need a token? Because you guys have to remember, tokens aren't equity. They're not shares. They're not dividends. They're not royalty rights. They're not IP, intellectual property. They're nothing. They're literally nothing. They promise a utility in their ecosystem. Like you have to use our token or else our ecosystem falls apart. So you have no ownership of whatsoever, zero ownership. And you're at the mercy of the exchanges. You're at the mercy of the whales. You don't really get liquidity how you want to get liquidity, and you really don't. There's no revenue of a business. If the revenue is speculation, that's not business. That is not business. And I always ask them, like, why are you doing an ICO? Why can't you just raise $200,000 from angels for a pre-seed to validate your idea? But blah, 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 blah.
Right, because an angel will look at that deal and say, you're out of your mind, go away.
Precisely, right? And the funny thing that like most of these ICOs are coming from places like China, Russia, the majority of them. And you have to ask yourself why. Well, a lot of people are trying to get money out of the country. It's different living circumstances compared to say North America or Western Europe. So there's reasons why people are doing it. And I just look at human greed and whatever, there's nothing wrong with that. They're doing what they're doing. But I just advise people, it's too good to be true. Like, why are you giving money to people if you think you're going to get a 400% return on this ICO? Trust me, like you're not. People will, but you're not the one. You're at the bottom of the pyramid. And as Brad said, majority of them are scams. And it's not like they go out and be like, hey, I'm going to be a scam. It's like, I actually believe what I'm doing to be good, but I'm so ignorant and I have cognitive dissonance. I have willful blindness that I'm not listening to anybody else. I can't tell you how many times I told people that you don't need a token. This is bullshit. Like, why are you doing, oh yeah, ignore everything and just keep on doing it. So we're going to see a bunch of these things crash within 2 years because the runway cash will run out, or a bunch of them will be hacked, which we've been seeing on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people losing tokens. So wallets aren't secured properly. They leave it online, etc. And then once these projects fail on the promise of even delivering a beta project or a product, and once the runway cash falls out, people realize that they're all garbage. And then like the story goes, from the ashes the phoenix rise, and within 3 years we're going to see like the future Googles and the future Amazons emerge out of this industry.
And I think it's just important to understand as well that it's so early in this space.
Super early.
It's so early in this space, and it's a brand new thing. And just look at Kickstarter. That's like another great kind of corollary. It's like most funded projects on Kickstarter never actually get shipped.
Yep.
And we're talking about a product that we have the manufacturing capability to produce. We're not talking about intellectual capital and IP, and the smartest people in the world need to understand, like he said, crypto economics and the technology and the tokens and the pieces of the puzzle. And then you still have the rule of startups, which is 9 out of 10 fail or more on top of all that.
Well, I hate to have to wrap it up. We're about 5 minutes past, but I would like to ask you if a quick link or where can they find out some more of your information. We've already said BlockGeeks.com.
Yep, BlockGeeks is great.
And then Make More Marbles with Brad.
Yep. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen. I've got a little slide for you real quick.
There you
And
go.
this is the
Facebook,
crypto cheat sheet.
Twitter.
It's got all my best learnings about the things related to crypto and whatnot. And you can go to this link, mmm.makemoremarbles.com/crypto to grab that. That's mmm.makemoremarbles.com/crypto. And that also has links to all Ameer's stuff. Ameer and some of his partners create some of the best content about blockchain and cryptocurrency on the web. Millions of people have already checked it out. It's where I've learned a heck of a lot. I read it all the time. Every time they come out with a new guide, these are like highly produced, multi-$1,000 each guides that come out very frequently. So that is one site that I send everybody to. I think it's phenomenal, and the internet agrees with me. So, you know, don't take my word for it. Look around on Reddit and ask people in the forums. BlockGeeks is legit. You know, we are always excited to have more conversations about crypto and blockchain, and we look forward to you guys reaching out with additional questions, or if you have kind of thoughts about it, or you want to kind of talk, you know, don't ask me for recommendations. I'm not willing to make them publicly because I just believe there's so much crap out there and I just don't even want to be bothered with it. But if you want a really solid strategy, you know, take an amount of money you're entirely okay losing 100% of every dollar, and just pick the top 10, right? And then next year rebalance in the top 10 and just kind of keep going on like that. So if you win, you'll win big. And if you lose, you'll lose small, right? That's an asymmetric risk reward trade. It's an investment if you have the patience for, and you're not just trading these up and down, speculating. That might pay off in 30 or 50 years or may not do anything. And either way, it was an amount of money you could have lost all of, you know, so just, you know, tread lightly. Don't take my word for it. Do your research, learn about the space because it has the potential to change everything. And that's all I'll say about that.
Y'all, thank you so much for meeting with me and being available today, letting us ask all of our questions. Thanks y'all for being here. Reach out. I'm easy to find on like 18 different platforms. Thanks to you again. Thank you.
Thanks,
Brad.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. We're grateful to be here. Thank you, Ameer, for being here as well. Thanks so much for listening to the Make More Marbles podcast. For more tips, hacks, and strategies to create an amazing, abundant life in your health, wealth, and relationships, whatever that means to you, head on over to makemoremarbles.com. Check out our cool explainer video about what we're about, and join our community of entrepreneurial game changers. We want to help you level up your life in every possible way. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please do leave a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next podcast.